Hello students, welcome to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, Hyderabad. As part of BA Sociology, we are talking about the inequalities, economic inequality, social inequality and political inequality. So, today in our class, we will discuss very detailed about this economic and social inequalities. Now, let us try to focus or highlight on economic inequality. Economic inequality is the difference found in various measures of economic well-being among individuals in a group, among groups in a population or among some countries. Economic inequality sometimes refers to income inequality or wealth inequality or wealth gap. So, this is a broad definition to understand what is meant by economic inequality. There are certain reports published by different organizations to understand this economic inequality. For example, now I will quote that Oxfam India. There is a international organization, Oxfam India, reports that consistently highlight that the top 1% of the population holds more than 40% of the country's total wealth. Now you need to understand, 1% of the population holds more than 40% of the country's total wealth, while the bottom 50% holds less than 3%. So, here you need to understand that there is a huge economic inequality is found in Indian society. Another important report like Niti Aayog, they also do lot of studies. They are in recent times they have done about the multi-dimensional poverty index. They have released this multi-dimensional poverty index. It tracks the deprivation, means people who are deprived of health, education and living standards. They have identified these gaps. While absolute poverty is declining, but interstate and rural urban disparities remaining, it is a issue, it is a stark. No, so the both reports gives us a better understanding that there is economic inequality is in a rising mode in India. How to address these certain things means we need to some of the methods to reduce this reducing the states in expenditures also we need to understand. The first one is targeting social welfare expenditures. When you would be able to target these social welfare programs, social welfare expenditure, then there is a greater possibility to address this economic inequality. And privatization of social services. When you privatize certain social services, there is a greater possibility of bridging the economic inequality. And withdrawal of different forms of state support, which is crucial to with regard to health, with regard to education, with regarding to certain amount of other factors. This is also will be helpful to bring out the economic inequality. Now, let us try to understand some of the dimensions with regard to economic inequality in India. The first point is the jobless growth. Now, try to understand the India's rapid GDP, gross domestic product, expansion has been largely driven by high skill and capital intensive services like finance, pharmacy and IT. This creates a structural gap, leaving nearly 90% of the total workforce who are on the ground, who are on the low wage, who are on the low productive wage and also informal sector. So, this is the one of the dimension. And severe agrarian distress. While 40% of the Indian population depend directly on agriculture or agriculture allied activities for their livelihood, the sector's contribution to be in national GDP, however, it is disproportionately, it is only 15 to 80%, leading to a massive urban and rural income divide. This is also one of the dimension with regard to economic inequality. Another is regressive tax burdens. We need to understand in India relies heavily on indirect taxes like GST from for government revenue. which is inherently burdens the poor people and wealthy equally on goods and services, rather than pulling more revenue from progressive directive taxes like income tax or corporate tax. So, this kind of tax is really burdening for the rural poor. So, another important factor we need to understand or discuss here is constitutional mandate for correction. If you look at Article 38 or Article 39 clause B and C of the directive principles of state policy, it specifically direct the state to minimize disparities and prevent the harmful concentration of wealth and material resources. So, the government has enough they can make a policies to minimize income disparities with Article 38 and Article 39 clause B and clause C. Now, let us try to understand some of the dimensions of social inequality in India. Very important, this social inequality in India. The important is caste based stratification. In Indian society, caste plays very important role to make it very hierarchy, and very structural hierarchy is in place. The caste system function as a closed system of social stratification based on ritual purity and pollution, determining access to social capital, education, health and other resources. So, the powerful people plays a key role in the society. The powerless people are not able to access, whether it is related to education, whether it is to livelihood, whether it is related to health, such a it is a social assets, social services. So, we need to clearly understand that social inequality is also stratified because of this caste. And the second point is the phenomena of cumulative deprivation, means low ritual status historically translated into economic landlessness and educationally exclusion. Particularly, the other backward class people and Dalit, these people are, they are landless, and educationally also they are not included, they are excluded. And some of the other points, despite lot of legal safeguards are provided, caste based inequality manifests through subtle discrimination, barriers in private sector employment, and violent caste conflicts over land, resources, assertions of dignity. These are some of the important points to understand how social inequality is in place in India. Another important thing is gender. Gender also plays very important role with regard to social inequality, because Indian society is majorly patriarchal structure. Deep rooted social mindset controls women's autonomy, women's reproductive rights and access to inherited property. So, this is very important to understand. Still, gender equality is not at all possible. So, there is a huge need to work on gender equality and gender equity also. And the another important is labor force disparity, means the paradox of India economic growth accompanied by historically low female labor force participation rates, and highlights the structural gender barriers, because the women participate in all kind of works, but however her labor, her work is not at all taken into the consideration. This is one more dimension with regard to social inequality. One more important is religious and tribal disparities, particularly in tribal areas because of development projects, deforestation and weak implementation of protective laws for ST population. This is disproportionately affected by poverty and malnutrition. So, that socially inequalities are found in this connection. And minority deprivation. Committees like HR committee have highlighted how specific religions minority lacks in formal education, public employment and access to institutional credit, means Mr. Sachar committee has given enough recommendations with regard to the Muslim formal education, Muslim people formal education and public employment and access to institutional credit. This is also need to be taken into consideration, otherwise social inequality go in a long way where the society could be divided more and more, and we need to understand that the religious and tribal disparities also very important points to address. Anyhow, we need to understand that economic inequality and social inequality, inequality based on income, inequality based on non-income, both are very important. The government public policy need to be taken up to ensure that this economic inequalities and social inequality shall be reduced, so that the entire society will run in a balanced way. Thank you.